Hello, everybody, and welcome to the webcast today. Today, we're talking around the subject of data visibility and how only good data can deliver the right levels of security. I'm pleased to have James Easton from Gigamon joining me today. James will run us through their solution, and how it helps to solve the visibility gaps we're going to talk about as well today. I'll let James make his own introductions later on in the webcast. But in the meantime, I'm Darren Clare. I'm Director of Accelerate Technologies, and we aim to help businesses identify and achieve cyber and digital resilience through a mixture of in-house assessments and vendor technology solutions. So just a quick run through of what we'll be covering today. Firstly, we'll be looking at the changing landscape. What does that changing landscape look like? How our workforce accesses applications today. Also the new unmanaged and extended locations we're seeing. And of course, the increased demands for data access from those users. We will then quickly discuss how this changing landscape increases the challenge of obtaining good data visibility and also providing effective security from the increasing internal and external threats. James will then cover off how it's possible to deliver the full data visibility that we need, how we send them to the correct security tools, and obviously in the most effective and very importantly, cost-efficient way to do that as well. Then finally, we will look at the combination of efforts and budgets, how infrastructure and cyber teams can work together, how they can reduce project overspend, but also look to reduce the complexities and the efforts required for the really complex detection and response side of things. So we talk about the changing landscape, but what is it? What do we mean by this? So organizations have been delivering business applications to users in branch offices, home offices. Obviously, we talk about the mobile devices, so they're available anywhere. And it's all typically through secure data centers with infrastructures that are in many cases in our complete control. They're in the control of the IT infrastructure teams. But more importantly, it's also they're in control of the data visibility. They have the ability to capture data with regards to simple, the predictable data flows that we see. And obviously, they can then send them through to their security tools for analysis. But we see the landscape is actually changing. It's changing quite a bit. We see everybody's driving towards this always available anywhere type application landscape. And this is typically using things like cloud and SaaS applications. And in many ways, this is actually creating more of a disjointed data flow. And inherently, this is now also creating data blind spots for the security teams. So we look at the increasing problem. So we know that we're moving into cloud. This is where we're seeing that problem compounded. We've got the latest high-speed infrastructures. We're upgrading them with deployments of 40 gig, maybe 100 gig capabilities in the data center. But these are all designed typically to move data quickly between applications and users. What they're not designed to do, and in fact will never be designed to do it effectively, is replicate those data flows. They're not looking to copy data for the purpose of visibility. So really, how do we successfully detect and respond to those increasing threats if all they're trying to do is push that data as quickly as possible to the next location? Again, this just extends the problem further. So as we start to push those applications out further into the cloud, shared infrastructures, SaaS applications, we start to lose even more control and also more data visibility loss. So effectively, that's just moving things further away from our teams and our tools. So this feels like a good opportunity for me to introduce James to talk about Gigamon, how Gigamon can help build visibility into these infrastructures, and overall just help you with that data visibility. So over to you, James. Let me just give you control.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Let's see. So hello, yes, my name's hello, we've gone too far. Yes, so my name's James Easton, senior sales engineer for Gigamon. Just a very couple of lines on Gigamon itself, because obviously we want to get straight into the sort of the technology. We are the world's sort of leading provider of network packet brokers. We provide a full end-to-end solution, so not just looking at your on-premise flow data or raw flow data and then converting it. We're actually looking into the public and the public cloud space as well. So we always talk about visibility, and the visibility is key. So I mean, how can you defend something that you can't have visibility of? So this is a classic network. We always see this, and when we present this to clients, they go, yep, that looks like what we've got. So we already have highlighted layer 7 applications going to your WAF appliance. You know, they want to have their visibility of HTTP traffic, but the classic is, are we just sending all packets to it? And this is probably typical to most of the security or network tools that you have in your environment where, look, I'm just sending you raw flow, go process, give me some results. So let's go through some of these, okay? So in some instances, yes, you will require some raw flow data to your tools to do DPI analysis, etc. A classic one is, okay, I have appliances, my routers and switches, they have the capability to generate span traffic to my recording or my IPSs, IDSs. But obviously span has its issues. Some manufacturers say, yes, we've got the capability of exporting span, but actually when you read their white papers, they actually recommend that you don't use it. There's issues with how much data can a span port send out, and of course in busy scenarios, so maybe if you are under an attack, say, you know, a typical basic DDoS attack, your processing would go up on these appliances because they're trying to rebuild fragmentations, or you know, maybe there's some other TCP type attacks going on. Then the span traffic is usually the first to be dropped, so you kind of lose visibility. Metadata. Again, most sort of SIEM platforms are just accepting logs, or they've just been fired out with the raw data again. Now, a couple of issues here is, well, that's great, but your SIEM platform doesn't really need to see all the raw data. And obviously log data, trying to get that out from all your sort of Microsoft environments, etc., is generally complicated. So what we can do with regards to a Gigamon platform is that we can actually generate that metadata from the raw flow. So if you've got issues, well, not issues, but if you have relatively high costs from your SIEM provider for the licensing because it's taken on data consumed licensing, then actually sending metadata rather than log and raw flow data will reduce the licensing costs quite dramatically. So there's a good ROI immediately on that one. NetFlow, SFlow, JFlow, CFlow, if everybody all remembers these sort of acronyms from early days. Yes, again, routers and switches have to generate this. Half the time, or majority of the time, you're at sampling at 1 in 4,000, 1 in 2,000, but that's the key thing, it's sampled data. So if you're doing portal interfaces to your clients and you're doing baselining on this data, then you know I would like it to be as accurate as possible rather than being summarized data. The other side of this is there's a resource strain on your routers and switches to generate this data. If I've got multiple platforms that require the NetFlow, SFlow data to be received, it is very painful for these routers and switches to export that. And actually, it's one of Gigamon's probably most popular license features that we do. So we can take the raw flow from the actual physical link between your routers and switches, so reducing the overhead of processing of generating sampled flow. We will take that flow, we'll take that raw data and we will generate the net flow on behalf, but it's not sampled. It's one-in-one net flow records. The other secondary license that we tend to say with the net flow is actually the deduplication of traffic. So if you understand sort of the net flow records on how you see the source desk, source desk, source desk before you get to the final desk, and then you've got the return of desk source, your flow receiver appliances have to basically build the flow records to create a single valid flow record. Now, obviously, if you've got a symmetry, we need to obviously tap more areas within your network to get that data out. So, of course, if my tool only sees half a flow record and we don't see the other half, that flow record is dropped, and then you're going to be all your baselining, your DDoS protection services, or whatever you're doing with the flow will be skewed quite dramatically. IPFix, an extension of the NetFlow, people call it NetFlow 10, is just adding additional fields to the NetFlow records. Again, deployment of probes. Sometimes, if I'm in my sort of private virtual environment and say, what you want, you add a probe on this, I don't trust that probe. It's not maybe Microsoft certified. Maybe there's a cost with deploying probes around your network. And finally, we've talked about visibility. Now, we are all about visibility. So it's to removing those blind spots because, again, you can't defend on what you can't see. So we've looked at basically everything here is around about north-south traffic, so traffic coming in from the internet to my virtualized server farm at the bottom, and then it goes back out again. Okay, that's fairly well understood. But what we would actually like to achieve is I'd like to see what traffic, maybe what malware is being propagated laterally across my virtual instance. And if I don't have this visibility, which we call east-west visibility, then how do I mitigate? How do I detect, mitigate, and how do I defend against this? So that's not just in your your private cloud environment, but we also have the ability to actually do what we call tap and aggregation and adjust the traffic coming out to either you've got public clouded tools, your security tools already based in the cloud, we can send traffic to that, or we can just basically adjust the traffic flow to what the tools care about, which is what we're going to talk about next, and we can just tunnel that back out of your public to your central site where all your monitoring tools are. So what do we really want to achieve? So Gigamon is a kind of a tap once solution. So we will tap physically off the line, like we talked about with the NetFlow. It's actually removing the burden from your tools, or sorry, from your networking, your vSwitch, your hypervisor, etc., to generate this traffic. We will physically tap the link, so we see both bidirectional transmit, receive, then receive and transmit data. We will bring this together in our GigaSecure security delivery platform. And then once we've got that data, then we can adjust the data to fit exactly what the tool requires, being it network or security tool. So if I've got a DLP product, then yes, maybe I want all this data coming in and I want to send all that data to a DLP. Maybe I've got a flow-based product. I want to look at all the data. I will generate the NetFlow, IPFix, CF format, or even the metadata and send it to the tool. Now, the nice thing about doing this is twofold. One, the easy version is that if I want to look at a new tool and I want to actually give it real traffic rather than labbed or canned traffic, I can almost get away with not having change control because in this instance, we're sitting offline. We're just getting a copy of the traffic. You can plug in your tool into our platform. We can send you live traffic and you can test it and then validate the data accurately. The second part of this, we've also mentioned about sort of extending the life of the tools. So this is a very valid ROI. We've seen this especially with the metadata when talking to your SIEM providers who charge you according to your bandwidth license, which we covered. But also, okay, if I have all these tools, what data do they really care about? Now, if I have a tool that's running at a 10 gig interface, it may be running out of puff slightly because of the processing. If we actually look at the traffic it really only cares about, and we can actually tailor the traffic through the Gigamon platform, then the reduction could be as dramatic as 80%. So now I don't have to say, right, oh, my tools were running out of puff. Actually, no, they're not. We just need to get a bit smarter on the traffic we sent them. So if I can reduce it down to, say, like 20% utilization, that a couple of things. It extends the life of that tool. And secondly, the financial implications of that, of course, is that we don't have to upgrade it. Also, the tool becomes faster to give you the results when you either write it scripts or you say, right, give me the data on what's going on. But also, it just allows it to actually be more valuable to you, because now we're sort of tapping the entire network. We have full visibility, so the tool becomes a more valuable visual aid to defending, mitigating, or just reporting on your total traffic in and out of your network, but also going across your network, as we discussed with the east-west traffic. So how do we do this? So we have physical and virtual taps. So again, for your private virtual instances and your public virtual instances. We are multi-cloud, as you'll see with the line that says orchestration. So the orchestration bit is our Fabric Manager platform, which manages all the rest of the Gigamon deployment, but it's also the orchestrator when we use API calls into AWS or Azure or Google Cloud or OpenStack, etc. So we can tap all this, any cloud sort of grouping of all these sort of virtual public instances. Traffic intelligence is what we've been talking about. So we will take in the raw data and then we can do things for that raw data. So we can look at subscriber data where we can bring in the two channels of, say, GTP correlation. We can do the same with voice with regards to SIP and RTP correlation, because generally, again, they're two channels out of an SBC platform. We could look at slicing. So actually, the amount of traffic that I send to a tool, well, does that tool really care about the payload data? Well, if it doesn't care about payload, and that's usually the biggest amount of data that you're sending to a tool, well, what if we just slice that? So we just say, right, remove the payload, and then we just send the rest of the packet. Obviously, we will rewrite the CRC off the back of that. Then we have the net flow and the deduplication, tend to go hand in hand, but I think we've kind of covered that. Header stripping, well, if your tools don't care about VLAN, MPLS, VN tags, etc., we can remove all those and then send the data on. SSL decryption. Now, we've already spoken about our platform being out of band or OOB, but if we want to do effective SSL decryption, so having trained or done training at certain firewall manufacturers, and when they admit to you that when they turn on SSL decryption, they get a 60 to 80% performance hit, then they're thinking, well, oh God, now I need to actually upgrade my firewall estate. Well, actually, why not offload that to us as Gigamon? So we can do effective up to 8K key, TLS 1.3. We can do the de-encrypting of the traffic, send it to your firewall or to any tools that needs to see or inspect unencrypted traffic. Then you can return that traffic to the Gigamon platform. We can re-encrypt it and send it on its way. We have masking, because obviously we need to be our financial institutions, which is our third largest sort of vertical with regards to revenue to Gigamon. We tend to do a lot of the sort of the compliance here, sort of PCI, especially for those guys, but you know, it's HIPAA as well, where we can actually mask traffic, so it might be sensitive names, addresses, phone numbers, that sort of thing. Tunneling, again, we've hinted on that from the tunneling traffic. Well, yes, it's tunneling, right? We can do it in your public, your private cloud, your on-prem. It's just a tunneling technology that we support. And source port labeling, that's quite a nice feature. So if you've got multiple data centers and you've got multiple Gigamon deployments, then what we actually do with that one is append. So if you look on Wireshark, we can append a label at the end of the packet stream to say, okay, it came from this interface and from this Gigamon platform. So it's a nice visual way of saying, all right, I know where this IP address is residing from. It sits in that data center through this interface. I can work back. So it's just a nice visual. So a couple of very newish features. I mean, they've been around a year, but I particularly like these, and it's what we call the application filter intelligence. We call it application center intelligence, but I would say it's application metadata intelligence. Historically, we're a tap and ag and smart company. We don't report, we don't analyze, we're tool agnostic, yeah? So we don't actually do blocking next hop advertisements, we don't report on the traffic. This is why when you see the names above here where it says tools and applications, we partner with a lot of these companies. In other words, give them the data that they only care about, which makes them more valuable within your infrastructure. With this new feature, application intelligence, we can get slightly smarter on, again, on the application layer to what data we send to your tools. So again, if I've got an email server system or an email platform that maybe does looking for extensions or attachments in emails, maybe it's an acceptable use policy engine or something like this, then I can actually tailor per application what is being sent to the tools now. So if I've got a tool that's looking at all the applications, and you think, well, why do you need to do that as part of your IPS IDS platform? Then if I can say I've got a certain amount of YouTube traffic or Netflix, just for example, then what if I can filter that out? Because to be honest, on the threat landscape or the threat radar, and it's got a very low CVE, CVSS scoring, do I really need to send that to my tool? So if there's large amounts of, gigabytes of this traffic going across your network, then does that tool need to process it? So again, we can get smart with the applications or the data that we send to your tools, and that's reducing the amount of data that tool has to process. The application sensor intelligence or metadata engine, again, with the NetFlow license, we give you the ability to generate NetFlow of every packet. Just every attribute, every packet, we will send that to your SIEM platform. With the application metadata intelligence engine, we can look at every specific application, and then you can have a look at the specific attributes for that application. So you can actually reduce the traffic or only send the traffic attributes that you care about for that application. So things like DNS, there are 39 different applications that we can pick up on. In fact, overall, we can track over 3,200 applications, and that sort of equates to about 7,000 attributes overall. In the next release, we're going to 5,000 applications. And we do this by using a bidirectional deep packet inspection engine to actually work out what the applications are, rather than just using port numbers, which can be a bit clumsy. So again, I've touched on about the Fabric Manager RFM. It is our single pane of glass. It is our orchestration platform for your public and private networks, but it brings everything together as a configuration window as well. The nice thing with the configuration window is that we have things like intent-based orchestration, where we made it very graphical and very sort of, I would say, wizardry. But it has its own wizards to say, okay, well, how do I configure SSL optimally? So we give you the walkthrough through what we call intent-based orchestration, or IBO, on how to make the configuration of that as easy as possible. Because again, doing it by CLI was actually quite difficult. So what I like about this being the next network manager is that if I have a tool that's fairly easy and understandable to configure, then should something go wrong, it should be easy and understandable to fix. The speed to fix to me is key, especially in the financial industries. So I hope that sort of hopefully generates some questions, and I hope that was of interest to you. And yeah, thank you, Darren. I hope that was okay.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, James. What strikes me is it just feels that this has got a level of intelligence within the Gigamon solution that is just unmatched by anything else you can be thinking about doing with a sort of an infrastructure or span ports or anything like that. So no, thanks very much, James. Much appreciated. So I kind of just want to finish on the subject of how we can combine efforts between the infrastructure and security teams. We all want to deliver more efficient data visibility, and obviously that collaboration is really, really key between those two teams. But more importantly, also how do we reduce budget spends? If we've got the right visibility platform in place, can we do that? And I think the argument is quite compelling in that respect. We look at the way security teams work. They just want to see good data. That's what's going to help them do their jobs effectively. And so, you know, what we see the security teams, they'll pick up the phone, they'll typically go to the infrastructure teams and they'll say, look, you know, we've purchased and deployed this new security tool, it's going to do this for us, it's going to do that for us. And really, they're asking for data to be sent to it. So they'll go to the infrastructure team and say, send me some data. But this is, again, where the problem comes into it, because the infrastructure teams may have already be sending lots of data to other tools, and you know, they're just not able to scale for the amount of tools that businesses are looking to place on the network now. You know, James touched on it earlier. You know, it's all about sending the right data to the right tools. And you know, security tools, like anything, they've all got to be architected based on the amount of data they will receive and process. So, you know, surely it makes sense that if we can send less data, you know, we're not duplicating the amount of data we're sending to those teams, to those tools, should we say? Actually, the teams will also have less duplication of effort. You know, we're all trying to detect and respond to these real threats on the network, and if we can reduce the amount of data that's been sent there that's duplicated, then it's obviously got to help those security teams. So before we finish up, I just want to see if there is any questions as well for James. I think we've had one question come in. So James, just the question says, you know, you talk about these smart features. Do we need all of them, and do you see customers traditionally deploying all of those features?
Oh, good one. No. We find that every time we talk to a customer, look, out in the world, there are hundreds of thousands of various tools out there for NetOps and SecOps guys to use. You know, we gather all the data in, we do something with the data, and then we can send it out like a NetFlow and dedupe. So if maybe the NetOps guys are looking at flow data, and then the security guys may have a SIEM platform and we'll generate the metadata to those guys. So that's only really 3 licenses, and that tends to cover the majority of deployments. But the thing is, you never really buy Gigamon for a single platform. It's a multi-platform assistance, I would say. But yes, I mean, if you wish to put every license on the box, it is quite capable. But again, it's down to, I mean, all right, if we do things that are very high intensive, like the SIP RTP correlation, the GTP correlation, and especially the SSL with the latest 8K keys, etc., etc., then, you know, we would have to look at sizing the Gigamon platform accordingly. But a recent customer, you know, they are doing SIP RTP correlation, they're doing header stripping, they're doing some deduplication, and then what they found is that, okay, that's all the outer bound side of things, and it's quite complicated to actually move that appliance to become inline so they can look at the ECHDE ciphers. So what they'll do is actually deploy another Gigamon platform at maybe a smaller chassis just to look at SSL traffic and keep that as a specific use case because of the way that you deploy. So in other words, what we're saying is it will really depend on what you want to achieve, what tools that you have, what kind of data does those tools need, bandwidth considerations, and how many data centers, and then obviously we can take that. I mean, we are a full sort of consultancy service. So it really is down to, well, how many tools have you got? What data do you care about to get to them? And that's where we come in to assist with that.
That's brilliant. Thanks, James. So I'll probably end there to say thanks everybody for joining the webcast today, and thank you to James as well for joining us and giving us a great overview on Gigamon. So thanks, James.
Thank you.